God, that would be awesome. You guys would be around.
You ready?
Yeah, and what we could say is, okay,
Serious about that.
I think,
Sorry, gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman's got my attention.
Good evening and welcome to the City of Topeka Planning Commission meeting. We are a commission appointed by the mayor and city council to plan for the orderly growth and development of the community, to hold public hearings, and to make recommendations to the city council on planning items. Please note that the city council rules state that the public hearings for planning cases shall be conducted solely by the planning commission. No additional public hearings will be conducted by the city council. Tonight's cases are tentatively scheduled to be heard by the city council next month. Agendas can be found at topeka.org. For the cases that require public hearings, the procedure will be as follows. First, the planning department staff will summarize the case. Next, we will hear from the applicant or their representative. Then we will receive public testimony. Public comments should be addressed solely to the chair and are limited to 4 minutes. Chris, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Mr. Freed is absent. Mr. Dean?
Here.
Ms. Jordan? Here. Mr. Canar?
Here.
Ms. Lawson?
Here.
Ms. Messina?
Here.
Ms. Ringler is absent. And Mr. Warner?
Here.
We have 7 for a quorum.
Thank you. First item on the agenda, approval of minutes, May 20, 2019.
I move that we approve the minutes as received.
Second.
Motion and a second. Chris, please take the roll.
Mr. Armstrong?
Aye.
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan?
Aye.
Mr. Canar?
Aye.
Ms. Lawson?
Aye.
Ms. Messina?
Aye.
And Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Next, item C, declaration of conflict of interest, ex parte communications by members of the commission or staff.
Yes, I need to declare a conflict of interest and recuse myself from public hearing item number 1, as I'm currently working with one of the applicants on the expansion of the Big O tire.
All right. I also will be recusing myself from items D4 and D5. They are represented by Bartlett and West and Ms. Sharp in the audience today. Any others? All right, let's move on. We have 5 public hearings listed tonight. The first, PUD 19-01, Sherwood Crossing Master Plan Unit Development Plan by 29th Street Partners and Binkley, Michael A., Rick A., Greg A. Requesting to rezone 14 acres that were originally included in the 16-acre Master Planned Unit Development Plan for Villa West Shopping Center, located at the northwest intersection of Southwest Wanamaker and Southwest 29th Street, to accommodate the redevelopment of the existing shopping center and new commercial uses on the property. Ms. Driver?
Okay, you pretty much, thank you, Mr. Chairman, you pretty much summed up the location for me, so I don't have to repeat that. The existing site that they're using, I'll just make one point, is that the 2 properties at the corner of 29th and Wanamaker, the Capital Federal and the Kansas Land Tire, are a part of the current Villa West PUD plan. They're not included in this new PUD, so their zoning will remain under the existing PUD for Villa West Shopping Center. The parcel in question is 14 acres. The existing shopping center is approximately 69,000 square feet. It also contains a 6,800 square foot automobile tire repair shop. So the staff report that's presented tonight and the PUD that's before you tonight is based on what we were given at the time by the applicant. It depicts a 2-phase development. Phase 1 is, let's go over there. Phase 1 is remodeling the existing shopping center, and that includes modifications to the canopies, the existing facades, and replacement of those canopies and facades, replacement of the covered walkways, and addition of landscaping in the parking lot. Phase 1 also consists of an expansion on the north end of the Big O Tire Repair Shop, which is property out on the frontage of Wanamaker. Phase 2 involves new construction. Shown on the PUD is approximately 30,000 square feet, which is the addition of commercial and retail, a new building in the middle of the parking lot, as well as a new building on the north end of the property. The background for the Villa West Shopping Center was that it was developed in 1980 after being rezoned from residential to commercial. A second building was located on the north end of the property in the late 1990s. The most recent and last amendment to Villa West entitled the use of the property at the north end of the site for mini storage warehouses, which is an I-1 use. So the current PUD actually allowed I-1 uses. Just a note on landscaping, Phase 1, although they're just remodeling and refacing the building, the PUD does require them to provide landscaping at 50% of what would be required if this were new construction, which is since they are requesting city incentives. Phase 1 also will apply the building design standards, and they would apply the Type B standard for Phase 1 and the Type A standard for Phase 2, which is the new buildings on the site. Staff did do a preliminary review of what was submitted for the exterior elevations, and overall the information was not detailed enough to determine full compliance with the standards. However, it does appear that the windows and other detailing appears to comply, except maybe the south and east elevations of Building G. Staff has made recommendations on signage, and we'll go into that in detail in a minute. Basically, the PUD had to take into account the existing signs on the site and also take into consideration that it's a redeveloped site, so it couldn't come into full compliance with the proposed sign code. Planning staff considered, since this is a zoning case, planning staff considered the golden factors, and the analysis in the staff report takes those into consideration. Overall, the area is characterized by retail and office uses on the east and south, and multiple family residential to the west and north of the site. The current PUD master plan proposes a new building on the tract and removes the entitlement for self-storage on that portion of the site. So that's on the north end of the property that was formerly proposed as mini warehousing. The proposed modifications adding retail and food service are suitable uses on the property, compatible with the commercial area. They replace the approved self-storage and allow the center to develop in a cohesive manner. Property is located at a community commercial node in the land use and growth management plan. Just a note on some of the potential negative effects. The proposed PUD is not less restrictive than the current PUD, but is also less specific about development in the area shown as Building F, which is on the north end of the property, shown as Phase 2, and also allows an additional building in the middle of the parking lot. The proposed PUD allows more C4 uses than the previous PUD with the additions of Building F and G. The addition of Building G within the existing parking lot may have some impact on circulation for the properties located along Wanamaker that may be using it for overflow parking. In addition, the uncertain nature of development on building site F at the north end could be a concern, particularly since the site abuts residential, and C4, in respect to noise and traffic, may allow some uses more intensive and intrusive than self-storage warehousing. However, overall, the site is commercial character. Disapproval of the PUD does impose some hardship on the landowner, as under the previous owner, the appearance of the center began to decline because of lack of maintenance and overall disinvestment. Staff is recommending approval, subject to conditions in the staff report, which are listed as 3A, B, and C. The memo that was passed out to you tonight does make a change to condition number D, condition number ED. So the applicant has agreed to those, and staff is open for any questions that you may have. The applicant's here to take your questions as well. Thank you.
Questions for staff? Mr. Holland, are you representing the owner this evening?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Kevin Holland, Cook, Flat, and Strobel Engineers. I do have owners Ferd Neiman and Dave Christie with me as well, so any specific questions that I can't answer, they are here to be able to provide answers or whatever you need on that side. But Annie basically hit it spot on. We're taking a pretty rough looking area, and it has gotten we work right kitty corner to this, catty corner, as we say in Kansas, to this property. And for the last 20 years, we've seen it in a state of decline. And what this does is improve the look of the buildings, improve the neighborhood. And obviously, I know a business on the north side might be a little heavier user than self-storage facility, but I know a neighborhood would rather have a nice looking C4 building than self-storage typically as a neighbor, especially at 29th and Wanamaker. Phase 1, they're looking to go very quickly, and so it's going to show improvement in this area in a very quick fashion.
I heard Annie refer to the Phase 2 Building F as, generically unknown. Is that generically unknown?
It is generically unknown, and the size is generically unknown as well. It fits into what the overall plan would be for that package, but both buildings could maneuver a little bit to allow a specific user or users into those facilities.
So the only circulation access to that is to go through the buildings to the back?
Or the existing access, which is on the west side of the property along 29th Street.
Okay, I didn't see it connecting yet.
Yeah, so actually in the blue phase, we'll actually increase parking there on the northwest portion, which you would be able to go to it, I guess as Topekans would say, just west of Happy Bassett currently sits. And then, yes, there's access through the building. It hasn't been determined yet if there's going to be access between the building E and F yet, just because it depends on what that building looks like in the specific architecture of how that building lays in there.
Any other questions? Annie, you also mentioned that we'd be getting in a little more detail about signs. Have we already done that, or was there more that you were going to talk about?
You want us to go over what we recommended more in detail, or do you want to go?
If you have questions about signs and want us to kind of give you the approach that's taken, I can address that.
Yeah, I guess just what of this process is reflective of what we just went through as sign code updates and,
Okay.
Yeah.
So parallel to this process, the governing body will be considering approving an incentives for the project, for the redevelopment of this property, particularly and specifically community improvement district and tax increment financing incentives. It's been our practice of late to, when there's incentives being considered, that we apply the standards for signs that are in the draft code that you've recommended to be forwarded to the governing body for approval. And so what we've tried to do in this case is look at the signs that would be permitted in the draft code for centers under a master sign plan. And so what that would call for is if there are any changes to the signage there, that they be modified so they approach those standards. So that's the conditions that were drafted are based on that. And they require that the signs be coordinated in design, and they are, as proposed. And that in some cases the signs be more limited than what they are. Specifically in the conditions, we recommended that the center identification sign, the primary sign on Wanamaker, be limited to 30 feet in height in an area of, I think it was 240 square feet. And then the sign on 29th be limited to a height of 25 feet in an area of, I can't remember what the area was, I think it was 120 square feet. But we also built into the condition that was drafted that if they could demonstrate that they need a little bit more signage than that, because they did discuss needing more than that, like 35 feet high for the sign on Wanamaker, and a little larger than what we initially recommended. And they did that. In this memo that we handed out, there's a exhibit, if you want to call it that, the elevations, the signs, sign elevations. And so they demonstrate how those signs would look. And as you can see, they're all coordinated in terms of their design with the same material, same basic monument style. Also with the communications, the email, they explain why they needed the signage. So in terms of the original conditions that were recommended in the staff report, based on the information they provided, they are going to be able to satisfy conditions 3A through C. We wanted to clarify that in order for them to satisfy those conditions, they should also need this other condition, the name of the shopping center, in this case Sherwood Crossing, not be included in the calculation of the sign area to determine compliance with conditions 3A through C. So this accommodates what they're proposing to do, but staff feels it's warranted in this case. They're trying to redevelop the center. The other important thing here that the applicant has pointed out is as they go out and seek tenants to occupy the space, they need all the help they can get. And one thing that's important to tenants is, hey, I need to have signage on the street. And so this accommodates that. That's my understanding anyway. So the other thing that was kind of at issue is condition D, 3D. We are recommending that property, which is currently occupied by Big O Tires. Big O Tires currently has 2 large pylon signs. They're pretty tall. I think they're probably 35 feet tall, pretty large. That those be replaced at some point, and they were replaced with a monument sign. And what we recommended was 15 feet and 60 square feet, 15 feet high and 60 square feet. They came back and said that's not going to work. We have these tall signs. That's not going to be feasible for our client or for the owner. And so we went back to 25 feet and 120 square feet. So that's what that condition does, is it allows those 2 signs to be replaced with one sign that's 25 feet tall and 120 square feet in size. Consider that in the draft sign code, an individual property that has this zoning would be allowed a sign that size. So that's not entirely inconsistent with what is recommended in the sign standards.
Thanks. Yeah, just nice to see, everything that we just looked at and you guys worked on being incorporated in the newer type projects. So.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I've got a general question. Mr. Driver, you mentioned the landscaping is 50% of what's required.
That is for the redeveloped the phase one, which is your refacing and remodeling to the existing buildings out there, because typically those wouldn't be required to do any landscaping.
Would
But
phase
since
2 be?
Phase two is, yes, everything would be required for
Okay.
phase two.
Oh, yeah, yeah. All right, let's go ahead and open the public hearing. Public comments should be addressed to the chair, limited to 4 minutes. Would anyone like to speak to this evening? All right, we will close the public hearing.
Motion?
Yep. I will, yeah.
Mr.
I would-
Chair,
I think there's a revised one here.
Mr. Chair, based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, I move that the Topeka Planning Commission forward to the governing body recommendation of approval of the proposed PUD master plan, subject to the conditions in the staff report and as revised per the revised recommended conditions in the staff memorandum. I make a motion for that.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Chris, please take the roll.
Mr. Warner abstains. Ms. Messina?
Aye.
Ms. Lawson?
Aye.
Mr. Canar?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan?
Aye.
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
And Mr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0 with 1 abstaining.
Oh, what?
Item D2, Sherwood Crossing Project Plan, finding of consistency with the Land Use and Growth Management Plan 2040. Mr. Warner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, the reason that we're talking about this is before the governing body can consider the project plan, approving the project plan, the Planning Commission has to weigh in on the consistency of that project plan with the Land Use and Growth Management Plan or the Comprehensive Plan. You heard information about the project already in the rezoning, so I will skip past that and talk about the land use policies then. So we have policies in our Land Use and Growth Management Plan that are related to fiscally responsible growth, Tier 1 development, redevelopment, and financial incentives to assist with Tier 1 development. Particularly in the executive summary of the document, there are certain pillars of prosperity, or pillars for a prosperous community that are listed in there, and those are essentially kind of overarching policies. And in particular with this project plan, invest in place and add value where we are, and then also return on investment are 2 pillars that apply to this project. And essentially those are saying that the city's made investments in infrastructure and services in this area, so it makes sense to basically support that redevelopment and get an even greater return on that investment that's been made previously. Growth management policies, our recent update to the Land Use and Growth Management Plan has delineated an urban growth area for Topeka, and within that urban growth area is Tier 1, which is the city of Topeka. And so within Tier 1, the plan encourages infill and redevelopment to take advantage of that urban infrastructure and services, so again, supporting Tier 1 development. And then to help spur that development, the plan talks about considering incentives for that development, and the TIF is one of the items that are listed in the plan. So staff's opinion is that the project plan is consistent with the Land Use and Growth Management Plan and recommends that the Planning Commission approve the attached resolution, which is 1-2019, finding that the project plan is consistent with the Land Use and Growth Management Plan 2020. With that, Commissioners, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for staff? Mr. Holland, any further comments? All right. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing then. Would anyone like to speak towards this resolution before us? All right, we will close the public hearing. I would entertain a motion.
I move that the Topeka Planning Commission approve the Planning Commission Resolution 1-2019, finding that the project plan is consistent with the Land Use and Growth Management Plan 2040.
One second.
Motion and second. Chris, please take the roll.
Mr. Armstrong?
Aye.
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan? Aye. Mr. Canar?
Aye.
Ms. Lawson?
Aye.
Ms. Messina?
Aye.
And Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Item D3, Z19-04 by Tim's Auto Sales LLC. Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is an application by the owner, Tim's Auto Sales LLC. The individual who intends to develop the property is here to answer questions. This is an application to change the zoning from C4 to I1 light industrial. The end goal here is to change the zoning to accommodate development of a storage facility, like self-storage, mini storage, other types of storage like that, which requires I1 light industrial zoning. Staff is recommending approval of this. So this is the location. You can kind of get an idea of how it's developed currently. It's primarily car sales, but there's a lot of outdoor storage on the property. So the general reasons for recommending approval is that the proposed zoning is the same as the existing zoning on the east and west sides of the property. It's compatible with the zoning around it. There is zoning of R1 on the north side. In staff's opinion, this is unlikely to be developed for single-family residential in the short term, certainly. Conditions would have to change quite a bit, I think, for that to be developed consistent with R1 zoning. And currently, it's vacant and used for agriculture. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan, also known as our comprehensive plan is the Land Use and Growth Management Plan. The future land use map is shown in this exhibit here. It's designated commercial, particularly highway commercial. The current use of the property doesn't entirely conform to the current standards. The change in zoning will facilitate redevelopment of the property in a way that's generally beneficial to surrounding properties and the community overall. And with that, we're recommending approval, and I'll take any questions you have.
Also in the document, there's a email from, I believe, Mr. Holland with a picture of, is that similar to the proposed building for this development?
That is my understanding, that is a project that's similar to what they plan to develop on the property.
Mr. Holland, any additional knowledge for us this evening?
Evening, Mr. Chair. Kevin Holland, Cook, Flat, and Strobel. Thank you for hearing us. I'm here representing the prospective developer, Travis and Ross Stryker. And Yeah, what that picture is, that's one of their facilities down in Birmingham that they have. They have them in 3 locations across the nation. And so as you can see, a little higher upscale storage facility, especially in this area. Did speak with one of the neighbors, which owns the golf course, and he was happy to see what was coming in and compared to what is the property is used for currently.
Can you drive into it?
You can. Oh, you mean from the driving range?
No.
I wasn't sure on the question there.
It just looks like a retail front. Can cars drive up to a storage unit?
This would be interior storage, and then the reason for the zoning to go to the I side is to have some outdoor possible storage. With the proximity on US 24 and the lakes towards the east, figured it would be a good RV or boat storage in the future if we could use the north piece of that property for that. Otherwise, the interior storage would have fit the zoning classification.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thanks.
Thank you.
With that, let's go ahead and open the public hearing for this item. Would anyone with us this evening like to speak to this? All right, we will close the public hearing. Any further discussion?
I would move that based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, we recommend to the governing body approval of the reclassification of the property from C4 Commercial District to I1 Light Industrial District.
Second.
Motion and a second. Chris, please take the roll.
Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Ms. Messina?
Aye.
Ms. Lawson?
Aye.
Mr. Canar?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan? Aye. Mr. Dean?
Aye.
And Mr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
With that, I will be stepping out. Mr. Canar will be taking the chair.
Just waiting for Mr. Armstrong. All right, and with that, we are on CU 1906 Cantilever Topeka LLC by Giant Communications. Mr. Nunabel?
Yes, Commissioners, this is an application by Giant Communications for a conditional use permit for public facility type 2. Specifically, this will be for control and maintenance of the company's expanded fiber optic system within the area on a parcel located between Southwest 28th Street and Southwest 29th Street. Visible elements will include a 360 square foot modular building, the height of 9 feet, with paved parking area for 2 parking stalls along with landscaping. The development site will be located beside the existing paved driveway at a location generally to the east of an existing building that's used as a state building, state offices now. It had previously been the Albertsons Market. Subject property is vacant and has been zoned for commercial use for many years. In regard to zoning and surrounding land use, the area is comprised of a mix of zoning districts and land uses, including commercial, office, institutional, and residential uses. Residential uses being the Normandy condominiums located to the east of a drainage ditch along the east property boundary. The proposed CUP
is in compliance with the city's standards and guidelines in regard to building height and setbacks, parking and access, landscaping and screening, signage, lighting and sound generation. In regard to design standards, the project applicants have requested an exemption from the city's recently adopted non-residential design standards, and staff have determined that this request is valid based upon the function, size, and use of the buildings pursuant to zoning code requirements. In regard to specific guidelines for a CUP evaluation related to conditional use permits, the pump station will generate the facility will generate fewer traffic trips than surrounding land uses. The building is smaller and development is less dense than existing development on surrounding lots. The smaller size of the project does not require a stormwater assessment pursuant to city requirements. The applicant did conduct a neighborhood information meeting on May 22nd. There were 5 surrounding property owners in attendance who asked questions on the project. No concerns were expressed regarding the project. Staff analysis was completed, as always, of course, in evaluating the proposed CUP. And staff find that the facility will have no detrimental impacts and is compatible with surrounding land uses. Staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit, including several conditions for minor areas of explanation and clarification. And that does complete staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Nunebelt. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Mr. Nunebelt this time? Then I would invite the applicant to come forward if they would like to address us.
Hi, my name is Austin Taylor. I'm representing Johnny Communications. I don't have a lot to say. I think everything is relatively straightforward. But I would like to say that we're excited to be a part of broadband growth in Topeka. This facility is going to allow us to utilize our network in such a way that we'll be able to facilitate there to the southwest side of the city. I think some for large cell, small cell, things like that we know partner companies of ours have got big projects they're working on. So we're just excited to be a part of it. And this facility will allow us to do so. Today we've got a piece of a facility down here at 8th and Jackson, which is where we'll transport out to broadband and other services out to that facility. So we're just excited to be a part of growth of broadband in Topeka.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Taylor? Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
With that, I would invite any member of the public that would like to address this to come forward. All right, not seeing anybody, we'll close the public hearing and open it to discussion among the commissioners. Okay, I didn't see any issue with the analysis in staff's report regarding the standards that need to be met for the project, so I would entertain a motion.
I would make a motion. Based on the findings and analysis of the staff report, I move to recommend approval to a governing body of the conditional use permit CU 1906, subject to the conditions of approval in the staff report.
Second. Don't hear any objections, so having a motion and a second, Chris, would you please take the vote?
Mr. Armstrong abstains. Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan? Aye. Mr. Kennard?
Aye.
Ms. Lawson?
Aye.
Ms. Messina?
Aye.
And Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0 with 1 abstaining.
All right, moving to item D5, CU 1907, City of Topeka. Again, Mr. Nunebelt.
Yes, Commissioners, this is another application for conditional use permit for a public utility facility type 2, the form of water pump station on property zoned R1 Single Family Dwelling District. The applicant is City of Topeka Utilities Department. The project is located at 2907 Northwest Topeka Boulevard. Visible elements of the proposed project will include a 993 square foot building, approximately a height of 21 feet at peak of roof line, with access to the site provided by an improved driveway, minimum of 16 feet in width. The site will also include a 5-foot high steel entry gate to be placed at the south property line, as well as a telemetry antenna 60 feet in height as utilized at other similar city facilities, along with new landscaping in addition to mature trees and shrubs currently on the site. The subject property includes an existing pump station that has been out of service for many years, located within a cement structure approximately 15 feet in height, and this will be removed as part of the project. The property is located again on the northwest side of, or on the west side of Northwest Topeka Boulevard, approximately 300 feet north of Soldier Creek. In regard to zoning and surrounding land uses, the surrounding area to the southwest and east is within R1 single-family residential districts, while the area to the east is within a PUD district with land use groups of M2 multiple family residential and C4 commercial pursuant to the Soldier Creek PUD master plan. The project has been found to be in compliance with the city's development standards and guidelines in regard to building heights and setbacks, including the telemetry antenna, parking and access, landscaping and screening, signage, and lighting and sound generation. In regard to design standards, the non-residential design standards as recently adopted by the city have been determined to not be applicable inasmuch as the subject project application has been in process for a period of time and prior to the city's adoption of these standards. In regard to specific CUP guideline standards, the pump station will generate less traffic, fewer trips, and surrounding land uses. The building is smaller and development is less dense than the existing development on surrounding lots. The proposed building does incorporate design features such as a pitched roof and earth tone colors for compatibility with adjacent residential development. The applicant did conduct a neighborhood information meeting on May 23rd. There was an adjacent property owner in attendance at the meeting who had specific questions on the project, such as type of buildings to be constructed and planned improvements to the jointly used driveway. Staff analysis was completed in evaluating the CUP, and if staff finds that the facility will have no detrimental impacts and is compatible with surrounding land uses and development. Staff does recommend approval of the application for a conditional use permit, and there is one condition clarifying a minor point. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you. Commissioners, does anybody have a question for Mr. Noonabel at this time? All right, thank you. Invite the applicant to come forward.
Good evening, Commissioners. Angela Sharp with Bartlett and West, representing the City Water Department. This project we're moving towards will provide a greater level of water service reliability and redundancy for the area, the North Topeka service area. And as John indicated, no detrimental impacts have been identified for adjacent properties. In fact, the pump station building that will be constructed is more residential looking in nature, so will be more attractive than the existing concrete structure that exists on the site that used to serve as the booster pump station when it was in service. So with that, I would stand for any questions you might have.
Commissioners, any questions?
I have a question. So since the one person that wrote in with an email about the traffic is really the only objection on this, can you elaborate on the access to this pump house? How many trips does it have a week or month?
They're anticipating that we'll just have 2 pickup truck trips per week for regular maintenance, because the telemetry antenna will allow them to have remote access to see how the station is operating, whether there's any issues. So they will probably come twice a week. which would be, as John indicated in the staff report, that would be much less than if it were a regular residential property with a single-family home on it.
So extremely low traffic.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mrs. Sharp.
Thank you.
If any member of the public would like to come forward and give testimony, or can do so at this time. Good evening, sir. If you could please give us your name and address for the record.
Greg DeBacker, 2907 Northwest Topeka Boulevard. May I hand out some items?
Yeah.
I have 10 of each. First one I'm handing out is traffic count for Northwest Topeka Boulevard.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Here's another one.
See, we've got a spare if you need one.
I had two.
And then, actually, I have one more. Sorry. I just one page, there were a total of about 4 pages. This was the contract.
Thank you.
Wiley, do you have any more of the first one?
What's that?
The first one? Oh, I didn't get the first one. He handed it out.
We do have one more.
Okay. All right, thanks.
You have what you need, Ms. Lawson? All right.
I'd like to start out first. Traffic count on North Topeka Boulevard, it's about 13,000 in that area. If you look at the next page, Croco Road, which has been 2 pages back, Croco Road at 29th and Croco is about 7,000, and it's been widened to 4 or 5 lane. North Topeka's been overlooked for a long time. Wanamaker Road, 37th and Wanamaker, about 10,000. So, and this is a 2-lane road where this pump station is proposed. South of there is a truck line, Pepsi-Cola is out there. And I know this pump station does not warrant a widening of the road by itself, but sometime the city's going to have to look at North Topeka Boulevard. If you turn it back about 5 pages, there's a picture of the pump station. I've called into the city code compliance. They're not maintaining this pump station yet. They say the city of Topeka, they did not know who owned it. I located who owned it on Shawnee County Appraiser's website. They still have not mowed it to this day. Hopefully when they do get the pump station going, they'll maintain it a little bit better. At the meeting on May 23rd, they said that they were not going to install a fence. I heard tonight, I guess they changed their mind. They are going to put a fence around it. Anyway, the drainage, I'm concerned about drainage. This is a lower level than across the road. If you look across the road, about 10 years ago, I opposed the Soldier Township apartments. A lot of water comes off all these roads across the road. We're going to have more road there. There is no drainage. I pay for a monthly water bill for water runoff, but it doesn't go anywhere except onto my property. I would like to have maybe the planning commission approve this plan only if they do some work on the drainage. If you can see the culverts are filled, the water doesn't go anywhere. And actually, when I built the house in 1990, had a building permit, the City of Topeka Building Department failed to make sure that there was proper drainage. I asked for it, but it didn't happen. On that one piece of paper, we had an agreement with the city to sell that property. I bought it about 10, 15, 20 years ago from Soldier Township. I did not want anything in my front yard. Now I'm going to have something in my front yard, but the property directly across from that was on, or is on the market, sorry.
Keep going, you have a minute.
The property across the road is on the market for $100,000. I figured $50,000 for my property would be a fair market. I did not get the property. Well, we signed a contract for $50,000, then eminent domain was starting. But I shook hands with a city employee. He agreed to it. He thought that was a good deal, $50,000. Come to find out that had to go through eminent domain. So I'm not a happy camper about this, and really don't want this in my front yard. You know, if they're going to put a fence around it, hopefully they will put gutters. I know the Old Roach's Hardware, they're making them, the liquor store, put in a drinking fountain in the liquor store. The Burger King over there in North Topeka, they had to do some road improvements on it along there. There's a picture of that in there. Was that it? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you
if
for your
you've
time.
got a 1 or 2 sentence conclusion, go ahead and then we'll.
Well, I just hope the planning commission or whoever is in charge will make the city stick to the same guns that they do other people, you know, the private people in Topeka. You know, maybe turn that, if they are going to put a fence up there, fantastic. If not, make the paved parking lot, put a couple basketball goals. There's no recreational area in North Topeka. Make it a nice area. Put a tennis court on the concrete.
All right, thank you. Just a moment. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. DeBacker? Yep. All right. Yes, go ahead.
The driveway, is it paved right now, currently?
It's paved, and that's another thing. They had another driveway entrance, but they're choosing to use my driveway as an entrance, which I'm not keen about. There were 2 culverts there, but one directly across from the, but they're wanting to use my driveway. Not real keen about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other member of the public like to address us? Applicant, we'd love to hear from you again.
Yep, I just wanted to clarify on some of the questions that Mr. DeBacker brought up. We are not currently planning on having a fence around the entire perimeter. There is a tree line around 2 sides of it. The gate that John indicated is just at the entries to the booster pump station building so that cars can't just pull into the booster pump station parking area and park there. So the gate is just there to prevent vehicular traffic into the station. The access drive that historically was used for the station prior to 2000 when it was mothballed actually came off of Topeka Boulevard and is in too close a proximity for city standards to put a secondary access with the existing residential drive that's there. And there also is a grade differential between Topeka Boulevard and the site that would make it not as advantageous as the location where his driveway currently is. And so as a part of the agreement, there is going to be a commercial standard concrete drive that will be constructed. Right now it is kind of an asphalt chip seal, narrower driveway access onto Topeka Boulevard. So it will be a much improved drive access. It'll be concrete, and then it will change to asphalt up to the booster pump station site. We also, right now, he is correct, there is a culvert pipe that may be there, but if it is, it's completely silted in at the entry, and we will be excavating and regrading that ditch line and putting in a 24-inch culvert pipe with end sections to allow that drainage from the north to flow south to Soldier Creek, which is immediately to the south. The site itself, because we're taking out the existing concrete structure and a part of the roadway, we're actually only increasing the impervious area over what's there today by about 4,000 square feet. And the criteria and the design criteria allows an increase up to 10,000 square feet without having any stormwater treatment. So we're well within those limits of stormwater treatment. I think that was the clarifications I wanted to add. Braxton Copley and Paul Bodner are also here with the Water Department to answer any technical questions or any other questions you might have operationally about the site.
Ms. Sharp, with the way you have things graded, will this project be putting any stormwater onto Mr. DeBacker's property?
No, it will all flow south to Soldier Creek.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Sharp.
Thank you.
Any other member of the public that would like to address the commission? Right, seeing no one else, I would close the public hearing, and I would ask if Mr. Nuneveld, if you have any information to add to the discussion about the fence and the drainage, or if the comments we've had are adequate.
I think they are, sir, yes.
Right, keep. Any discussion of this, Commissioners? Reviewed the evaluation criteria. I'm satisfied with staff's evaluation. I would entertain a motion.
Based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, I move to recommend approval to the governing body of the conditional use permit CU 19/07, subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Chris, you take the vote.
Mr. Chair, can we just make sure there's no further discussion before we go to the vote?
Absolutely.
Just for the record.
See, dive in.
I appreciate Mr. DeBacker's comment on the Topeka Boulevard. I don't know if this is the place that has anything to do with that necessarily, but I appreciate that. That is a kind of maybe a neglected street for the traffic flow, but again, I don't think that this increases that, so. That's all my comment.
Right, I understand. I don't spend a lot of time driving out there, so I'm not, I don't know, but I don't think that the water station really affects the traffic flow issue out there with two vehicles a week, so. Anybody else with it, like to discuss the motion before we take the vote? Seeing no other comments? Chris?
Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Ms. Messina?
Aye.
Ms. Lawson?
Aye.
Mr. Kennard?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan? Aye. Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Armstrong abstains. Motion passes 6-0 with one abstaining.
Ready for item E1? P 1911 Horseshoe Bend Subdivision Number 5, final plat by RT Builders LLC. Ms. Strabb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a preliminary and final plat, Horseshoe Bend Subdivision Number 5. The property is located north of Southeast 45th Street, adjacent with the Kansas Turnpike. It's east of Topeka, somewhat east of Topeka Boulevard, as well as the Landon Trail lies just to the west boundary of the site. The final plat area comprises 10.79 acres and composed of 32 lots at 3 dwelling units per acre. 31 of those lots are proposed as single-family dwellings. One of those lots is planned as a stormwater management easement that will contain 2 retention ponds as required. The zoning of the site is a PUD R1 uses. That initial PUD plan was approved back in 2000 when the site began construction, the original plan was approved and the original preliminary plat was approved. Just giving you some background, the property was zoned in 2000 under the Grand Oaks Master Plan Unit Development Plan. The main reason for the PUD zoning at that time allowed a reduced right-of-way of 40 feet with 16-foot utility easements and pedestrian access easements on either side of the lots, rather than doing a standard 60-foot right-of-way. I believe the intention of that was to allow a little more density than what they could have done with the 60-foot right-of-way for the streets. So the PUD, there is a minor amendment to the PUD in progress. That is just to adjust the phasing. And as I mentioned, this particular change to the phasing breaks up the last phase, which was originally intended for all 93 lots. It's the area outlined in yellow. They're breaking that up into 3 new phases. So that is the revised preliminary plat. The final plat is the area outlined in red, and that's what you're approving tonight. Overall, the preliminary, this does ultimately reduce the number of lots because now they're providing an area for a stormwater management easement that will be designed to address water quality treatment as well as water runoff. The applicant did hold a neighborhood information meeting on Thursday, May 23rd. There were 3 people who attended that meeting. Some of the key issues that were brought up at the meeting were related directly to the design of the subdivision, were the requirement that the city is asking that a trail easement be provided to connect the Landon Trail to the public park further east. That public park that was to the east was dedicated as part of the original subdivision for Horseshoe Bend. Another question that came up was whether there should be a connection with this phase for Grand Oaks Boulevard, which is that street running north and south. That will be constructed with the second to last phase of this. Both Public Works, Engineering, and the Fire Department didn't see a need for that street to go in with this phase. They're satisfied with Truman Avenue going up and then bringing 43rd Terrace to the west, and then you have 2 ways in from 45th Street. The next concern that came up was the maintenance of the stormwater management easement, which is on a separate lot. That has ultimately been addressed as well, with the developer submitting a signed operation and maintenance manual to the Department of Utilities, which addresses who will maintain those retention ponds and also outlines how they're to be maintained. And that, according to engineering, will stay with the land. Staff is recommending approval. There were 4 conditions in the staff report that, as mentioned, those have been addressed, and that is in the memo that was sent to you earlier today. I am open for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
questions for staff?
Robert, did you say that they will be providing access to the Landon Trail?
That is correct, that they will be providing a connection when they build the street to connect to the Landon Trail. The county has indicated, though, that they would be willing to accept that trail easement for maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
Are there representatives from the owner this evening?
Yeah, good evening, Commissioners. Mark Boyd with SBB Engineering, and I also have with me Josh Belinsky with SBB Engineering. RT Builders is the owner. Ray Thurlow is also here if you have questions that you want to direct towards the owner. Yeah, to kind of sum it up, this is a rather large last phase for an ongoing subdivision that is just basically being broken up into smaller pieces to allow for a more economical development. So with that, I'll just stand for any questions you might have.
Is there a timing for the rest of this section to move forward?
Yeah, I would believe it'd be with any residential development as in Topeka as this phase is built out and is marketed, then the next phase will begin on the tail of it. When that might be, I guess we can be optimistic and say next year we'll be doing it.
Any other questions for Mr. Boyd?
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
I do have a question. One of the concerns that was brought up at the meeting, the very first one, states with the street connection for the current proposed phase creating like a raceway, so I'm assuming speeders driving down. Was any consideration brought into like adjusting it or putting some kind of like barriers to slow people down in the road? Or is it not really a concern when looked at it?
Well, as with any residential subdivision, you know, the speed is design speed is meant to be low. You can't, you know, there's few things you can do to slow people down, and you're not. I suppose it'll be a raceway as much as any other subdivision in town like that. As far as traffic calming measures, no considerations were ever given for creating any barriers, or certainly not speed bumps. You know,
Okay.
we don't do that. But, no, I don't think there was. I guess engineering, when looking at the street plans, didn't see where that was necessary.
Thank you.
Okay, well,
Any other questions? Thanks, Mr. Boyd.
okay. Yeah.
Not a public hearing associated with this evening?
There is no public hearing associated with it. You can always entertain public comment if you'd like.
Here comes one.
Sure. Yeah, we'll, if there's anyone from the public to speak to this, we'd entertain those comments.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Thank you for hearing the public speak. My name is Tim Emerson, 110 Southeast 44 Parkway, resident of Grand Oaks. I was at that meeting on the 30th, and some of the concerns we brought up is, why can't Grand Oaks be extended now? It's only approximately 300 feet. And where are you getting time down?
That's a quick 4 minutes.
Oh, you're back here? Why can't it be accessed now? Because when they start construction, most of the road construction is going to be increased on Truman, which is a very narrow road. Grand Oaks is extremely wider than Truman. Kids play in this area. Concerns are brought up, there is no stop signs at all in Horseshoe Bend or Grand Oaks at all in any of the area. I sent an email that evening to Councilman Padilla and Ron Raines on 30th of May, so I've not heard anything back from them concerning that. There's no signs like saying children at play. Children play in the streets quite frequently with their basketball hoops and everything else. So as I mentioned earlier about speed bumps, I'm not sure if that's a thing that's going to be brought up. But one concern is the rainwater or stormwater runoff it's right next to, I mean, literally 50 to 60 feet from a child care daycare center that this is putting, the rainwater being put off next to. And there is no speculations or anything brought up about mosquito control at all. So that's one of the concerns. And so if you don't extend Grand Oaks, you only got one way in, one way out for EMS, not just fire department, but for respond, for ambulance response and police response at all. Another concern that's brought up is about during that trail is if there's no fence or anything border there, anybody from that trail can walk up to the backyard of these people's house. It's open area. So the concern is now, right now, the homeless people are living down in off Landon Trail right now. So if a fence or something can be brought up or some other concerns about that 10-foot wide opening, that was the people who live on that side over there, that was their concern. That's the only thing I have. Since I'm a resident of Grand Oaks, I'm concerned because the kids that play in the area, we don't want to be back here until a kid gets hurt and killed and have another meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Driver, this phase will have a south connection
Yes.
and an east connection to 43rd Terrace?
That's correct. The 43rd Terrace goes further east and connects down to 45th as well. I think that is via Horseshoe Bend Drive. And then Truman, it'll connect over to Truman. So it does have two ways in and out. And although it may not be ideal not to have that connection in, we did follow up with the fire department and as well as engineering. And they feel at this point, with having the connection off of going through to Truman, that it's sufficient until they come in and do the connection with the next phase.
And that is the next phase that would go?
Yeah, it would be the second to last phase then. So phase 2 is shown on there. It will have to go through at that point.
So I also saw on your conditions that the stormwater management plan would have to be approved by Public Works prior to the final plat. Is that the plan then that would detail out the detention area that's been defined and how it would operate?
We did pass out a revision to those conditions, the one that's, if you have a copy, it was emailed to you earlier. So that management plan has been approved by utilities and engineering, and the applicant did submit that signed operation and maintenance plan to engineering, and they've accepted it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I was incorrect. This is subject to a public hearing.
Okay.
Because this is approval of the preliminary and the final plat, correct? So if you wouldn't mind just asking one more time if anyone
All right,
wants to speak.
again, we would entertain public comment if anyone else here tonight would like to speak to this item.
Greg DeBacker, 2907 Northwest Topeka Boulevard. There are areas I know in Lawrence that have, instead of speed bumps, speed humps to slow traffic down. My kids are all grown, but, if a hump will save a life, let's do it. I think the Planning Commission should maybe make that more common in a lot of residential areas in Topeka. You go to Lawrence, you see it all over the place there. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Yes. I might as well go ahead and address that. Any sort of traffic controls is really not governed through the plating process. It's an operational control that comes about once the street plan is approved by engineering and put into place. So you won't necessarily find any stop signs or speed tables or yield signs or anything usually on your plat. It's just not part of what your purview is. That's a traffic engineering purview that is done after the plat and after after the street plans are approved before it's built. So, just so you, in case there was a question.
Thank you. With that, then we would close the public comment portion. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. Was there any further consideration given to the concern that was raised about the trail being open such that anyone could just walk up, and concern about the homelessness? Especially in light of the fact that this is heavily, has a lot of children.
I'll try, and staff, you can, if you know any, because I haven't been in touch with the county necessarily, but one thing that we see is, we're talking about homeless. Homeless do not want to be where people are and where homes are. So that's why you have that sort of location there. Once you open it up and have more people going through that and connecting to it, our experience is that will actually make people move, that homeless population will move to areas where they're not seen as much. Now, it will have the reverse. Obviously, anybody can connect through that trail into the neighborhood, which is exactly, that's part of what we're trying to do, is make those connections with so the property owners have that connection. That's been planned. It is otherwise, you're ended up having to go far out of your way to access the trail. So this is an amenity that will actually be an asset for the neighborhood, the subdivision. That's kind of how we look at it, not something that invites things that shouldn't be there.
Any other questions? That I would entertain any motion this evening.
I would move to forward approval of the final plat for Horseshoe Bend subdivision number 5 to the governing body for acceptance of land to be dedicated for public purposes as conditioned on page 4 and as amended in the memo from Bill Fyander on 6/17/219 regarding P19 Horseshoe Bend subdivision number 5.
Second.
Motion and a second. Chris, please take the roll.
Again, just make sure there's adequate discussion. Any other further comments before the vote is taken?
Yeah, any other discussion? Yeah, I guess just in general, if they are building one phase of the remaining area, I'm comfortable this has an east and south access point. And I like the connection to the trail as a part of the development, to be able to have access and encourage more use of the land and trail. So I think I'm comfortable with everything that's in here.
I would agree with you on that.
Any other comments? All right. Chris, please take the roll.
Mr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. Kennard.
Aye.
Ms. Lawson.
Aye.
Ms. Messina.
Aye.
Mr. Warner.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Move on to discussion items. Item F1, small cell wireless facilities. Mr. Hall?
I'll take it.
Strike that.
Arm wrestling.
Mr. Finder?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Tonight, we just wanted to introduce you to this topic because we anticipate bringing back to you an amendment to the zoning regulations to accommodate small cell wireless facilities. I'll call them small cells. These are characterized by different than what you saw a couple months ago with the tower proposals, the 3 tower proposals from AT&T. The small cells are no taller than 50 feet. They're also limited to 3 cubic feet in volume for the antennas, so a smaller antenna. The equipment itself is limited in size. These are all passed down by the FCC in terms of their regulations. The other characteristic about them that is different from a larger, taller macro cell tower is that they are in the right-of-way for the most part. So they would blend in with the poles, the light poles, and other utility infrastructure within a street right-of-way. So that's a big change that is on the horizon. As I alluded to, the FCC has, and as you learned, kind of coming from off of the larger tower items and discussion a few months ago, localities, municipalities are fairly well restrained in having discretion whether can deny these or not, as long as we can, if we have some reasonable design standards and locational standards. And so we have that. Administratively, we've done that. We have aesthetic guidelines that both engineering at the City of Topeka and at Shawnee County have both adopted as part of their specifications standards. Why this is coming to, so you're like, well, why is this coming to us? Within the next, few months, we've already had application for, I think, 18, at least I don't know if it's an application, but we certainly have had what? Inquiries? Inquiries about 18 of these sites. To give you a sense of the magnitude, they are recommended to be, small cells are recommended at 60 new small cell facilities per square mile. That's a lot. So based on the size of our city, based on what we have seen through these inquiries, that could be up to 2,000 CUPs over time. And I don't know about you, but I don't know if we have the stamina to really handle 2,000 CUPs. So it's a, so we have a need, not just from that standpoint. Our zoning code doesn't specifically address small cell facilities. That's why there's that need for a CUP. We require CUPs in a lot of different districts for the larger towers. So if we don't have a definition for small cell and we group all small cells as large cells, as a large cell tower, that's why we come up with 2,000 CUPs, and we begin to have nightmares about that scenario. That's the perfect storm. So we're prepared to accommodate small cell facilities within the zoning code so that we don't have to do 2,000 CUPs, so that what we can do is, for the most part, have an administrative guidelines, administrative standards that we will plan to bring you, and then that way, since these things are not going to be uses that you can kind of indiscriminately not say yes to or no to, there's the need for the guidance and the standards up front are critical. So what we put in your packet is some educational material. There's a good article that we found from the National League of Cities, which really gives you an overview as to what small cells do, why. As I was explaining to you, a small cell on the street, really at 50 feet tall, doesn't really broadcast and transmit a large area like the taller towers do. So it's really meant to serve that car coming by or that building on that street. So that is, and this is sort of the forefront of some 5G technology with the small cell facilities. So it's really all the demand, all of us that are requiring a lot of more speed and capacity is causing some of this demand. In the other attachment is the aesthetic design guidelines, design and aesthetic guidelines. These pretty much will probably, these address the location and the look of the different types of small cell facilities. Small cells can be on an existing pole, or they could be a brand new pole. And the ones that are on existing poles will have different standards than ones that are brand new. The brand new poles have, for the most part, are addressed in those guidelines. So what we bring back to you might look something like, okay, in these zoning districts, we would allow them to be administratively approved, provided they adhere to those guidelines. There may be another district or two that might be a little more distinctive. We may need additional standards, but we would bring those and write those up front and bring those to you to look at and review. I'm gonna wrap on that, and with hopefully not overstay my knowledge of small cell facilities. Ms. Feeney also, I think, is one of our experts on this, from an FCC standpoint and knowing how localities can regulate and not regulate these. So we just wanted to, again, dip your toe into that water tonight, and before we bring you this back, maybe next month or the following month, we'll kind of gauge that. But we'll be pleased to answer any questions that we can.
Yeah, what would address spacing and frequency of what's allowed? If we have standards that say they should look like this?
I think in our guidelines, we do have a spacing standard. There, at least so there's 4 sensitive areas. There's residential, historic districts, downtown, and and downtown/mixed-use areas, and I think parks is the other one. And I think, and I'm going off of memory, but I think we do have address spacing in those, actually on page 14 of the aesthetic guidelines, there is a spacing chart. If that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Okay. And the funny thing is, we did a little bit of research, and because we're thinking there's some really special places out there in the nation that that these things are coming into, and they're into downtowns and historic areas. We researched Washington D.C. and in their monument core, and they had picked. Oh, thank you. There's also, and they had. They had these things every 60, 70, 90 feet in front of monumental buildings along Pennsylvania Avenue, and so, and it wasn't as obtrusive as you might think. But that being said, that gives you some sense that how much or how little we have a say in this. We just have to have, and the guidelines that we have were really cobbled together from some cities that already have these guidelines that have some higher standards and design standards that we thought were appropriate. So yeah, they're on their way. Mary, is there anything else you want to add?
I've got a good question. So if these become more prolific, does that mean that there's less likely to have the big towers? Or will they basically over time, take the place of what the big towers were?
Commissioner Dean, I don't think that is the idea.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not, at 50 feet tall, they just cannot transmit what a large tower can. So I don't think those are going anywhere.
These supplement, don't replace.
Right. True.
We'll need these to have a self-driving vehicle communicate with our other city vehicles.
At front, AV, autonomous vehicles, this is what this would be perfect for. So, I'm sure you could think of all the applications right now. Or not. So no action tonight, but certainly want to just educate you, and we'll plan on a near future meeting to bring something more specific back to you on an amendment.
Thank you. Other communications to the commission this evening?
No, I think I already updated you on the, on the tower. Sign code, I knew there was something. Sign code, we have scheduled a discussion item, I think it'll be in August with the city council, August 13th. Will be the first chance we get to discuss the item with them and present. In the meantime, we will be sitting down with them individually as well to go over it. So just keep you up to breast on that. And I think I don't think we had any other items.
Just for those interested, the governing body tomorrow night will be addressing the Sherwood Crossing CID and TIF issues. So if you want to follow along with the rest of the discussion, I think tomorrow night.
Yes, the TIF will be up for action, I believe.
Right.
And what you approved tonight to go to the council will be, the project plan and the PUD plan will come back to them in July or August, actually. I think it might have to be in August.
Well, unless they have a special meeting.
Yeah, unless they have a special meeting, yes. Oh, yes. So this was timely, indeed.
All right, thanks, everyone. We're out.
All right. Good job.
Katrina says thank you. What are these things?